number 10, we have the Rainbow Batman suit from Detective Comics number 241. This is the suit where we get to see Bruce Wayne's fashionista persona as he gets to fight crime in all sorts of different colored suits, from green to purple to yellow to white to red, which on the cover looks more like a neon pink to me. And of course, rainbow. Now you might wonder why the Dark Knight would want to wear all these costumes, but as always when it comes to Batman, the explanation is purely logical and slightly convoluted. See, the Bat Diva did this in order to draw attention towards himself and away from Robin, who earlier had performed a heroic act as Dick Grayson, pushing a girl out of the way of a speeding car and injuring his arm in the process. And since Batman don't believe in work from home culture, and to his credit it is the 50s, he takes the money he would have spent on Robin's paid leave and cops himself some new fancy outfits so that no one would pay attention to Robin's arm and realize his secret identity. At number 9, we have Raven's New 52 redesign from Teen Titans number 17. Raven's original cloak is simple, elegant, and iconic, and so to recapitulate that essence for the New 52, they took all that and put it in the garbage and just went, Raven? Needs feathers. Listen, I know she's supposed to be gloomy and mysterious and whatnot, but covering her face completely is stupid, and what they covered it with looks ridiculous. Not to mention the whole bird theme as a whole is severely uninspired. And also the knee pads. Why does she need freaking knee pads? Heck, if you're gonna take it that far, you might as well throw in some elbow pads, shin guards, and a jock strap for good measure. Morons. At number 8, we have Cyborg Spider-Man from Spider-Man number 21. This is probably the most 90s Spider-Man costume out there, though I wouldn't be surprised if one of you guys in the comments proved me wrong. Solo nearly ended Spider-Man, believing him to be Doc Ock thanks to an illusion cast onto him by Mysterio. But Peter was rescued in the nick of time by Cyborg X, who took him to Care Labs to get fixed up, where he would awake with a new metal cast, an eyepiece, and some stitches. He was even gifted a utility belt, though Spidey never puts this one to use. And while the original version of the Cyborg suit is disbanded fairly quickly, probably on account of it being so hard to look at, it's worth mentioning that a Pete from a different timeline decided to go all in with the cybernetic enhancements, leading to a truly cyborg Spider-Man whose costume is seriously done right. We're even gonna get a fresh take of the character on screen in the next Spider-Verse movie with Cyborg Spider-Woman, and I'm all about it. Well, save for the spiky shoulder guard. Personally, I feel it's a little bit out of place, but maybe we'll get a good enough explanation for it in the movie, but probably not. At number 7, we have the Superman Unchained armor from Superman Unchained number 7. Okay, look, we can all agree that the Unchained armor is undoubtedly badass looking. That's not my point here. My gripe is the fact that Superman's wearing it. You see, Kal dons the armor when he realizes that he's vulnerable to attack from the weapons wielded by General Lane's army. And the suit, which comes with a hammer and shield, is able to withstand a few blows that supposedly would have one-shot the Man of Steel. Okay then, so why does he need a shield? He is Superman after all, it's not like he needs anything other than his fists for combat. Or better yet, why doesn't he just ditch the suit altogether and just keep the shield, as it proves to be far more effective at sponging blows from Lane's weapons than the armor is. And don't even get me started on the hammer, which is literally only there to rip off Mjolnir. Not to mention how uncharacteristic and lazy it is of Superman just to put on thicker armor when a greater threat presents itself. Because it would have been much more satisfying to see Superman outwit his opponent instead of just out-tanking him. Like, okay, DC, listen up. Maybe you can use this design for some sort of Thor, Darth Maul, Megazord hybrid character, but Superman, guy doesn't need it. Give it to someone else. At number 6, we have Iron Man's nose from Iron Man number 68. There's change in the air. I can smell it. One of the most iconic examples of a redesign gone wrong, we have that period of time where Tony Stark thought it would be a good idea to include a nose in his mask to make him look more expressive and help strike fear into the heart of his enemies. Buddy, the only thing you're striking me with is an intense desire to laugh in your face, because let's face it, the addition of a big metal nose ain't exactly intimidating. Now you might be wondering why Marvel would even give him a nose in the first place. Well, the story goes that one day Stan Lee was complaining about one of the studio's new artists. See, Stan thought that Tony's eyes were too close to the surface of the helmet for there to be any room for a nose underneath the mask, and so Stan asked, where's his nose? The editors took this to mean that Iron Man should have a nose, and so they gave him one. That is, until Stan caught wind of the change a few issues later and demanded that the editors change it back. At number 5, we have Hawkeye's tunic in Avengers number 72. Good lord, dude! pants! Not only is Hawkeye one of the bravest Avengers on account of him being super powerless, but to stand shoulder to shoulder with Earth's mightiest heroes in what's effectively a dress is a whole new level of courage. Not to mention that this was right after some very questionable decisions that led to Hank Pym turning Hawkeye into the size-changing Goliath who sports an equally decisive costume, that one including those redundant bolted shoulder and waist straps. Sorry to say, buddy, but this fit just makes you look arrogant. Arrogant? No? Okay, I tried. At number 4, we have Captain America's exoskeleton, debuting in Captain America number 438. On yet another edition of Why Does This Hero Need a Whole Suit of Armor, we have Captain America. And while his excuse is a little better than Superman's, it's still pretty lame. You see, Steve Rogers became completely paralyzed by an illness brought on by the very super soldier serum that granted him his superpowers in the first place. And so in order to allow Cap to continue his crime-fighting career, Tony Stark fashioned him this exoskeleton. And after getting some implants that would enable him to operate it, Cap was back in action. Now, I've included this one on the list because the whole concept is a bit ridiculous. I mean, super soldier serum induced paralysis just makes the serum itself completely redundant. Like, if you wanted to give Cap an Iron Man suit, just give Cap an Iron Man suit and do away with the whole degenerative disease nonsense. I mean, Spidey got an Iron Man suit, more than one, and he didn't need to get paralyzed to earn it. At number 3, we have Plaid Daredevil. Okay, this next one is seriously cruel, and if you laugh, your soul is going straight to Mephisto. This panel comes from What If Volume 2 number 17, the comic that asks, what if Daredevil had a dishonest tailor? To which Kingpin and Punisher are seen laughing in his face. See, I think this is dumb not because of the plaid, although it is pretty ugly, but because it's uncharacteristic. You see, Daredevil wouldn't have gotten ripped off. He can't. He can literally smell fear and dishonesty. It's what makes him such a good lawyer. So either this universe's Daredevil is missing one of his most crucial hyper senses, or he's Canadian. Either way, it's nothing to laugh about. At number 2, we have Hulk, the Horseman of War from Incredible Hulk number 456. That's right, not only has Hulk been a villain, an Avenger, a space gladiator, and the conqueror of entire planets, but now we can add first non-mutant war horseman of the apocalypse to his resume as well. His armor, made from celestial tech, allows him to accomplish feats of strength with ease, which the irregular Hulk would probably find at least a little strenuous, like picking up and tossing an entire Egyptian pyramid, for instance. His helmet also has the added bonus of calming his inner demons, allowing the Hulk to become more cold and calculated. And if I'm being honest with you guys, the real reason I included this costume on the list is because it makes Hulk look like a jacked version of Marvin the Martian. Am I the only one who's made this connection? Can't be. And at number 1, we have Mangaverse's Black Panther, who made his very first in-costume appearance in Marvel Mangaverse Eternity Twilight. The Marvel Mangaverse has plenty of questionable redesigns. I'm looking at you, Spider Gloves. But when it comes to the King of Wakanda, boy oh boy did they do him dirty. See, instead of utilizing the vibranium of his homeland to build himself a super suit, T'Challa of Earth 2301 seems to have replaced his sacred herb powers with the spirit of Kwamatha, transforming him into a furry. As if things weren't furry enough with Tigra around, who, after watching T'Challa transform, immediately gets the heart-shaped eyes for him, anime style. Okay, look, maybe I wouldn't have so much hate for the suit if there was a suit to begin with, as the king's suggestively shaped loincloth leaves very little to the imagination, and the bat ears. Ugh, why is he the only anthropomorph with hyper-realistic ears?
Number 10, Wolverine's patch disguise. Wolverine's patch disguise. Okay, bub. So you know I'm a big Wolverine fan, and if you follow me elsewhere on the interwebs, you may also know I'm a big patch fan. However, even I, a major fan, can acknowledge how ridiculous this look and disguise is. While the Gambit miniseries we got recently did help to justify Gambit's kind of weird costume choices, the patch miniseries definitely did not do that. Although that miniseries, written by Wolverine writing legend Larry Hama, which takes us back in time for an untold tale from the patch era, is still amazing, and you should definitely check it out. The funny thing is how even in the comics, the other characters who interact with Patch and Madripoor eventually fess up to the fact that they pretty much always knew Patch was Wolverine, admitting that his attempt at a disguise is as ridiculous and dumb as we all thought it was. Still, I do love the Patch look, so this is more me pointing out how silly it is, as opposed to dumb in like a bad way. This is actually a lovably dumb superhero suit, I would say. Number 9. Superman Red and Blue. Admittedly, these designs are actually kind of really cool, but it's more the power sets that come with them and how they attempted to, in essence, reset Superman with these looks that makes them kind of dumb. Although I do admire DC for wanting to change up the design and the character, which honestly was a revolutionary choice. The fact remains that this is comics, and returning to a status quo, especially for a character as old and as respected as Supes, is kinda necessary, which is why this didn't really work and a lot of people didn't really like it. Number 8. Swordsman. I don't know about you, but I personally find Jacques Duquesne's look a little silly. Like, what is happening with that helmet? Is that a helmet? It's not, right? Because it's like attached to his whole outfit, which is also really weird. What's happening there? Also, I don't mind the tunic and the tights, but the weird pink and purple color combination here is interesting for color choices. At least that's how I see the colors. I don't know if you guys see pink and purple, but that's what I'm seeing here. And the fact that while he has gloves on to protect his hands, he has nothing to cover his arms, except for, I guess, those arm bands. What are the arm bands for? Are they supposed to protect him, or are they like just for adornment? The thing I love about the modern look for the Kotati version of this character by comparison to the original human swordsman who first appeared in Marvel Comics back in the 60s is that at least this plant version, while still not having full sleeves, had the improved design of wearing bracers. Honestly, I think that makes more sense for a master swordsman rather than gloves and armbands. And also, just for context, I was talking about the original swordsman design there, so. Number 7. Azrael's Batman. As per Saya Dubray's suggestion from the comments on part 1 of this list, I had to include Jean-Paul Valley's Batman outfit here. You're completely right, Saya. It is one of the most 90s outfits around. And while I am a big fan of dumb 90s outfits, that doesn't make them any less dumb. It just means that I love things that are dumb, which is I think fine. And this outfit is definitely included in the list of dumb 90s outfits for sure. From the weird cape collar to the metal accents and back again to the insane amount of muscle definition that we can see through what must be the tightest fitting outfit ever. Also, metal garters. I mean, having a metal garter on your leg, I imagine that has to be uncomfortable. Number 6. Wolverine's no nose. Wolverine's nose is not really a suit at all, but it is a whole look that Wolverine had for a time that was bizarre, and I thought, hey, if Tony's iron nose can make the cut on AJ's part 1, it's important that I also include Wolverine's nose on part 2 here. While Iron Man having a nose added to his suit was weird for the character, Wolverine had the opposite problem of completely losing his nose, which was also weird for the character. However, at least this was more of a stylistic choice inspired by the story than, you know, an arbitrary change to the design based on where Iron Man's eyes are. So I will at least say that in the defense of this pretty strange look for the character. It came as a result of Wolverine having the adamantium coating ripped from his bones by Magneto, which also turned him feral. For a few years he'd become more bestial in nature than he normally was, which apparently also meant his nose, I guess, had to go, becoming more of a flat central spot on his face with 2 nostrils, kind of like became pushed into his face. Almost. I mean, honestly, this version of Wolverine almost becomes unrecognizable when you take the nose off. Number 5. Smallville's Aquaman. Whether we're talking sleeves or no sleeves, second generation or first generation, the Aquaman look for Smallville was pretty ridiculous and honestly kinda dumb in a bad way. While I typically try to approach dumb lists with less of that kind of outlook because, you know, dumb doesn't always have to mean bad, and it definitely doesn't usually mean bad for me, this costume, in my opinion, is actually pretty atrocious. I honestly, I don't really like this one. Honestly, I think I'd rather have the Golden Age look with the weird fins on his arms and his legs over this one. It just looks like a weird jogging outfit to me, and I know it's probably supposed to be like a wetsuit, but no, just let's pretend it didn't happen. Except we can't because it's on this list, so now we all have to remember it. Number 4. The Crossing Thor. I mean, everyone in The Crossing looked pretty wild, but Thor is definitely up there for me personally. The Crossing is the event where we learned that this whole time Iron Man had been basically a sleeper agent for Immortus, aka an alternate timeline version of Kang the Conqueror. The whole time! Dun dun dun! In honor of this very important and historical time, Thor and many of the other Avengers ended up with kind of new looks. Now, Thor's costume was definitely the most 90s look I think I've ever seen. The only thing it's missing really for me is pouches, honestly. What it lacks in pouches though, it makes up for with everything else in abundance. Tons of chains and elaborate excessive harnesses, and one of those weird like face masks that covers part of your face, like the sides and the top, but leaves a hole on the top of it for your hair to come out. And of course, I believe this was actually supposed to be what future Thor was meant to look like in this comic, in like another timeline, despite this look truly screaming 90s. In the story, this appeared to be a vision that we got of what a future Thor would look like. Now, thank goodness that hasn't ended up happening in this current timeline, at least not yet anyways. I don't know, that might still be somewhere lurking. Number 3. Star Sapphire. When it comes to Star Sapphire, Carol Ferris, she isn't always a hero and she isn't always a villain either. She's kind of done both of those things. She served both roles, but either way, she usually does so pretty ridiculously dressed, I gotta be honest. I mean, not always. She's had some reasonable costume designs and some that I've liked, but for this point, I'm focusing on her one-piece bathing suit-like costume with the middle of it cut out to the point that it becomes theoretically, structurally unsound, I'd say. For the record, I don't mind a woman who shows off her body. In fact, you know, I too enjoy that, both as a woman and both as someone looking at women, especially when it comes from a place of empowerment. I don't really mind anyone showing off their body as long as they're the ones making that choice for themselves, and it makes sense. Truly, doing so can not only be a good showcase of confidence, but also of self-love and self-celebration, and that's hot to me. But this costume is just objectively ridiculous, because how does it stay on? I mean, I know that it's, you know, probably like a construct, likely created by Carol, so we can explain it away with what is basically like kind of cosmic magic. But imagine cosplaying this look. Imagine it. Just imagine you wearing this costume, and how does that work? Without added invisible straps or literal glue or tape, it becomes impossible. And for that reason, I have to call it dumb, because logically, in our world at least, where sadly there are no green or violet lanterns, it simply doesn't work as it appears. Also, I have only ever seen people successfully cosplay this look with invisible straps. Glue would likely damage your outfit, and honestly, it's really hard on your skin, I know, because I've worn it under costumes before, and tape would probably sweat off unless it was really cold out. And I know because I'm not a super sweaty person, and I've also worn tape before and experienced that, which, you know, if you have to wear it in the cold too, you'd be really cold in this look. So really the only option is invisible straps, which clearly Carol doesn't need somehow in the comics, as she's never drawn with them. Unless maybe she is, but they're invisible so we don't see them. Even invisible straps, you usually see them, so just makes no sense. Number 2. The Crossing Wasp. I don't just want to talk about the crossing here, folks, but as ridiculous as Thor's look is, Wasp is possibly even more wild. Now, she kinda had two looks as well. The one she wore at the beginning, which is kind of like a metallic bodysuit that somehow like fits her like spandex, and possibly even has a metal pocket on the legs. I'm not sure. I saw that in one of the panels I was looking at, and I was like, wait a minute. Does she have like metal cargo pants that are skin tight? It looks like a pocket to me. The second is after she is resurrected in Avengers issue 394 and comes back literally looking like a pink bug woman with bright pink hair and bright pink wings. Number 1. Original Peacemaker. I have to say, I really love how dumb this look is, and I love that we managed to somehow keep it in the DCU, almost one for one. The reason why I went with the original version of Peacemaker's costume from his days at Charlton Comics isn't just because of the white pants, which to me are an absurd fashion choice to make when you know you're headed into a fray. Wearing white pants in general for me is like a huge thing. I'm a messy person in my day-to-day, so I can't imagine getting into a fight with white pants on. But the other thing that I really think is strange about this that really gets me is the weird giant helmet. It looks like there's like a thick doorway sitting on top of Peacemaker's head. Number 10. Spider-Man's 2021 hoodie suit. Spider-Man's 2021 hoodie costume is definitely an odd one. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this one didn't bother me myself too much. There are parts of it I actually kind of like. I actually really like his shoes, but I do know people who pretty passionately felt that this look is ridiculous. And I'm including it because I value the specific person's opinion who actually even mentioned that to me, and I think they made a fair point for why it was so silly, so I'm going to indulge. indulge. The Spider-Man we are talking about here is of course Miles Morales, and the look we're talking about is the one he donned before this current look that he's in right now, which is kind of a return to more of his classic look. I like to call this specific look though his hoodie costume, although to be fair that's a little confusing because he has another hoodie costume, but anyways, hoodie 2021. It basically looks like he's wearing a hoodie with leggings and of course sweet kicks. Of course I will say this costume looks super comfy, which for me makes more sense than some of the other things that superheroes are known for wearing, but it also greatly deviates from his normally sleek design, which is I think what was missing for most who weren't fans of this look. While it is a bit goofy looking, especially with the leggings, which I gotta say I kind of agree, kinda wish he had looser pants to kind of match his hoodie, this costume was actually made by one of Miles' friends as a replacement, so at least it also had a reason for existing in the story. Number 9. Wonder Woman's secretary look. Forget the old. The new Wonder Woman is here, and she is depowered and working as a spy and business owner, baby. The kind of Wonder Woman you probably never really asked to see, but the 70s gave it to us anyways. Admittedly, the actual fashion sense of this look is pretty great, I gotta say, so although in some ways this is kinda dumb, I also feel like the actual fashion, amazing. And I mean all around throughout as well. But the fact that it comes with Diana not having her powers anymore is pretty tragic, which is why it's going to make our cut. Even though this was done in an effort to actually promote feminism at the time. The revamp was actually intended by the creative team behind it to encourage other women to strive for independence and was actually pretty well executed, I gotta say. Even though taking away Diana's powers would in retrospect be seen as a downgrade for the character in regards to her history. Which is why this makes our cut, even though I understand what they were trying to do was not that, but it unfortunately ended up being seen as a setback as opposed to a move forward for the character. Number 8. Martian Manhunter. This was really the only suggestion I got from the comments on our part 2. People were saying that we never talk about male characters in skimpy outfits and how those are dumb, and Martian Manhunter was one of the ones that was suggested. And I do agree that Martian Manhunter does have a weird outfit, but I also didn't know too much about his outfit and what it means, so I decided to look into it. And as I was expecting, while this outfit does look pretty ridiculous with Martian Manhunter's little shorts and his X-straps over his bare chest with his long flowy cape, it turns out there is actually a reason behind it. So it kinda does make sense. Martian Manhunter being a shapeshifter, it's as I expected, and apparently his clothes are actually just him, because he's a shapeshifter. It's just a weird thing to think about. His suit therefore is something he chose to shapeshift into, and it seems to be inspired by the heroes around him. Martian Manhunter in his normal form actually looks more alien even than we know him to look, and is a little bit more spiky. And so his appearance on Earth is actually him trying to stay true to his Martian heritage, while still shifting his appearance somewhat to look more humanoid, so he'll be more accepted, and he makes himself look like he's wearing clothes that he feels makes him look heroic, as that's what he wants to be. He wants to be a hero. So if you think Martian Manhunter dresses weird, it's really kind of a reflection of how Martian Manhunter sees most male superhero costumes and just superhero costumes in general, and maybe the way that we see them. In fact, I definitely see inspiration in his look from another alien superhero, Superman. You know, with his green skin and his little booty shorts, which sometimes are like little briefs. It's kind of got a Superman vibe to it a little bit. Number 7. Susan Storm's cutout suit. Oh boy. This is a 90s classic in some of the worst ways, I think I can safely say. Now, I love a woman in a sexy costume, but this one is a lot, even for me. And what's worse, they made it narratively so that Sue designed this one herself, which feels not right for the character, but hey. If that feels pretty out of character for Sue, who refers to feeling like an old frump in her previous suit, you're not alone in thinking that, by the way. Many people like to defend this costume by actually saying that narratively its creation makes sense because it came from her evil persona Malice, actually, who was still possessing and influencing Sue at the time, and that this is actually an indicator of that. While this might be true, I'm still skeptical as to this being the real reason outside of the canon for this redesign. And even if that is the only reason, she had this suit, I still don't really like it because as a Sue Storm fan, it doesn't actually come from Sue herself, but from Malice, who was controlling her at the time. Which I know Malice is kind of like a part of her, but it's like the evil part of her. So there's really not as much agency here for Sue. Number 6, Vision. Marvel Comics initially had a completely different character who is known as the hero Vision. This was actually back, I believe, when they were Timely, before they were known as Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics would ultimately, of course, ditch their original version of the character and later get a completely new version, an android instead of an alien, who would end up as the Vision we know and love today. Not only is this original Vision's costume a product of the times, that insanely thick gold belt that he's wearing, but if you consider Martian Manhunter's costume to be ridiculous, Vision likely inspired that look, having a similar origin and a similar appearance initially, and appearing 15 years earlier in the comics in 1940, whereas Martian Manhunter, I believe, first appeared in 1955, so yeah. Number 5, Mangaverse Black Cat. Mangaverse Black Cat has a pretty wild look. To be fair to the universe, this one fits, I would say, in regards to, you know, a manga look, but boy oh boy is it strange when you think of Black Cat's standard look over on Earth 616. I mean, Black Cat has always been a sexy character, as many are in comics, but she doesn't usually have quite a deep V-neck. I'm not sure how exactly this suit also really functions. It must be made of some very firm material or like glued into place for it to stay on. Also missing are the tufts of white fur we're used to seeing Felicia wear, which I actually do miss. I really like those. I still feel like those could have been incorporated in some way in this look, but I guess they wanted to move away from having this version of the character look too similar to her, you know, 616 counterpart, which honestly, fair enough, but still the deep V and the super long claws for me feel pretty weird. Maybe it's just because I'm not as into manga as I used to be, I don't know, but that's where we're at. Number 4, Doctor Strange, a new Sorcerer Supreme. The 90s was a time when many folks got new looks. Some of them were, no, actually almost all of them were pretty terrible. But that's why we love them, right? Steven was not exempt from this. He got one of the most mystical 90s looks after years of having what I would say was a relatively unchanged costume. It didn't change that much, and even today it's kinda got a similar vibe. His costume was tweaked here and there, but usually for the most part it's just been slightly updated. But this was a pretty crazy refresh for him. His hair was even different. This transformation took place in issue number 75 of Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme, where Steven revealed himself at the end as the true Doctor Strange. The sunglasses are what really get me with this one, though honestly, kinda wanna cosplay as 90s Strange now. I mean, what a vibe. Also, I love that he comes out and he's like, the sun, I must put on sunglasses. To make sense of why he's wearing sunglasses. Which, I mean, you know, you gotta make sense of that, otherwise how am I supposed to accept as a reader? Number 3, Starfire from Red Hood and the Outlaws. Based on how the comments looked for part 2, I can already feel the animosity surrounding this point just building up, just from me even mentioning it. I could end the point here and I feel like people would rage. But regardless, I'm gonna dive into my perspective of this one anyways, because, well, I mean, that's what I'm here to do, so that's what we're gonna do. Talking about costumes that I think are somewhat dumb, and so we're gonna get into that. As I've said before though, and I will say again, dumb to me doesn't always mean bad. It can mean illogical, silly, or contradictory. It doesn't necessarily mean bad. I love a lot of bad costumes myself, so they're not bad, they're just, I don't know, on paper good. Does that make sense? Well, I don't actually mind the design. I do think this look for Starfire was a bit much. I do think Starfire makes sense wearing less based on her energy absorption abilities. However, that being said, her first costume was basically just like a one-piece swimsuit with some cutouts. This is like not even a bikini level of coverage. It's like a bikini bottoms with cutouts with like a collar shoulder thing and pasties. And I mean, it's definitely an homage to that original look, but they undressed it even more for like really no reason. Add in the fact that Starfire was also an amnesiac at the beginning of this run, and I feel like we could have done better by Corey here. It would actually be less ridiculous to me if Corey was the one to have chosen this with all her memories attached. Then it would actually have some agency. This was kind of just a weird time in general for her character. Also, because it bears bears repeating, apparently, I am not critiquing the outfit because it is sexy. It's more the issue of how extreme it is and what was going on for Starfire in the story when she wore this look. I like sexy costumes. I like characters who wear sexy costumes. That's all fine with me. Number 2, Superman's t-shirt and jeans look. I mean, what even is this look? I understand wanting to modernize your character's appearance and give them something totally different, but a t-shirt and jeans just seems a little too low-key. And I know it had a narrative explanation, but still, it's pretty ridiculous. This is the outfit Superman wore when he drove around the US on a motorbike. He couldn't fly at the time, and what a time it was. I will say though, this one would be really easy to cosplay at least, so it gets some points for that, because I mean anyone could do this look. I could do this look. I could be this Superman. Number 1, Red Sonja's chainmail bikini. Now of course I have cosplayed as Red Sonja, but even I can admit that her outfit is pretty ridiculous. And I say this with much love for this outfit. The whole point of wearing chainmail is to protect you, so wearing it in a bikini form, it doesn't really make any sense. The only thing I can say about this that kind of makes sense is Red Sonja really doesn't care what other people think of her, so I could see her wearing a chainmail bikini because you just didn't care, but it's not good armor, you know what I mean? And sure, it's an iconic look that I will happily wear any day of the week, well as long as I'm feeling like wearing a chainmail bikini, but that doesn't change how goofy it is, as is evident by many of those who write and draw her, changing up what she wears inside the comics while kind of saving that iconic look more for either a single moment in a story or just for the cover. So I feel like even creative teams acknowledge this.
Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Valkyrie from the Ultimate Comics. Valkyrie is an incredibly capable warrior and is probably one of the strongest members of the Ultimates, but she wasn't always that way. Initially, Barbara Norris was just a 19-year-old girl with no actual powers who was obsessed with superheroes, specifically Thor. She did have some novice level martial arts skills though, and she used those as a member of the Ultimate Universe's Defenders, who were really just wannabe superheroes. They went off pretending to be superheroes for clout, essentially, until Loki gave them all real powers. She then eventually joined the Ultimates, but all the while she was claiming to be an incredibly capable warrior, she was suited up to go tanning, basically. Valkyrie initially was pretty scantily clad for most of her appearances. Later on, after working with the Ultimates for a bit longer and having some real training with real Asgardians, she would begin to armor up to bring her more in keeping with someone who is actually engaging in armed combat on the daily, but for a good chunk of time she was jumping into battle extremely unprepared. Maybe coming back from the afterlife taught her armor was kind of useful, but I think the change in her costume could actually also kind of show her character's growth in a weird kind of way.
Number 9, Death's Head. Death's Head is a character more prominently featured in Marvel UK, who honestly looks like he just stepped out of Reboot to me. Or rather, Reboot's Megabyte looks like he may have taken a page out of Death's Head's book when it comes to his look, I should say, since Reboot actually came out after Death's Head first appeared and was created over at Marvel Comics UK. And while I do think Death's Head's look is very extreme and exaggerated, which is why he is going to make my cut here, I will say it does kind of make sense when you learn that he first made his appearance in Transformers issue 113. I mean, he does kind of have that extreme Transformers look. But Death's Head himself is not actually a Transformer, he's a robotic bounty hunter actually, although he prefers being called like basically a peacekeeper. But you know, bounty hunter, peacekeeper, I guess those terms are interchangeable. But while you might be wondering if he can even make the cut as a hero, yeah, he pretty much does. He's basically like a bounty hunter with a moral code, sorry, a peacekeeping person with a moral code. So walking the line of being a hero, I'd say. Although I'm kind of now wondering if he fits the suit criteria, as his suit is really his body, but I'm gonna count it because, you know, many robots, they don't really wear suits, so it's weird to think about, but you know, many robots are kind of just walking around like kind of naked.
Number 8, Armored Daredevil. Matt Murdock has been through a lot of redesigns. As one of the most popular Marvel heroes, that does make sense. His first initial change from yellow to fully red stuck through basically until the modern day, but in between then and now, Marvel still flirted with several other ideas. After getting a pretty brutal beatdown at the hands of the Wild Pack, Daredevil decided that maybe a little armor would be a good choice. He faked his own passing as Matt and then designed himself a new red and black black suit with prominent silver plating on his shoulders, knees, and up the sides of his legs for extra protection. Now, if I'm honest, I think this suit that first appeared in Daredevil number 321 in 1993 actually looks pretty cool. Maybe I'm weird, but something about it just feels like yes. I will admit, for a character who's pretty dependent on stealth though, it may not make the most sense, and it was rather flashy, but he still used it for a decent chunk of time, and I'm sure the extra protection came in handy a few times when he used it to fight villains like Hellspawn. Thank God he went back to just the red though. That's the classic, and I like that.
Number 7, Professor X and his Shi'ar exosuit. Professor X's Shi'ar exosuit, oh my. So this is one I personally find to be kind of silly, more because of my own headcanon to be honest, so go with me here. I don't know why this manifested for me, but when I was looking back on that fight against Magneto where Wolverine gets the adamantium ripped from his bones and Professor X as a result shuts down Magneto's brain basically, I saw this suit and I couldn't stop seeing it, and it lives still in my memory and in my heart every time I think of Professor X, really. And maybe because it's a 90s comic look, maybe because of how bulky it kind of looks to me, I don't know, but I just imagined it as being like a slow moving clunky suit that like allows Charles to walk but also doesn't save much time. Like he's walking like this, like he's like I don't know why I imagine that, but that's what I do. Also, the idea of Charles possibly wearing something made of metal to go up against Magneto in a fight, I thought that was pretty ridiculous. Although apparently this suit is like somehow like telepathically fueled, which I don't know, must be a Shi'ar thing. However, this never came up in the fight, the fact that his suit is maybe made of metal. I still don't really know for sure what this exosuit is made out of. At the end of the day, Charles technically won against Magnus, so maybe he knew something I don't know about this suit. Or maybe it's like metal, but like, I don't know, it's protected from certain abilities because it's made by the Shi'ar. It looks like metal. I don't know.
Number 6. The nipple suit. Batman relies heavily on his tech. His Batsuit is probably the most important of that tech. It's highly advanced in terms of super suits, and it's constantly being improved and added to. Sometimes it gets a tech overhaul to battle a villain, like the zebra suit. Sometimes it will get a redesign to better personify where Bruce is at in his life. Kinda like the Zur-En-Arrh suit. But of all the suits donned by Bruce Wayne, one stands above the rest. And all it took was the addition of a pair of nipples. In both Batman Forever from 1995 and Batman and Robin from 1997, the director, Joel Schumacher, decided that he wanted his heroes to emulate human perfection, and so he was inspired by statues of Greek gods and heroes. This is why both of his Batsuits worn by Val Kilmer and George Clooney have a shiny, muscle-adorned physique and, of course, nipples. It's really a very small detail, and if it wasn't for a close-up shot of just the chest and its extremely prevalent nipples, I might not have even noticed. But when you realize they are there, you realize that no other superhero has nipples built into their costume. This one is just iconic.
Number 5, Nightwing, red suit. Oh boy, the New 52 was a time of reinvention for a lot of characters, but then, on the other hand, it was also a time of radical change for pretty much, in most cases, really no reason. Which is kind of what happened to poor Nightwing here, because the New 52 was supposed to be giving us fresh new takes on characters. DC decided to completely revamp his look by going from his classic blue to red, which really seemed to serve no purpose that I can see myself, other than to be a very different color than the one we're used to seeing Dick wear as Nightwing, because well, I mean, it's very different. I mean, red has always been more of Jason's, or I would say even maybe Damian's color in my mind when it comes to former and current Robins, and even after donning this new suit, it was almost immediately discarded as Dick Grayson's secret identity was revealed, prompting him to change his hero name from Nightwing to just Grayson, and ditching the suit as well with all that change. So really, what even was the point of this?
Number 4, Black Condor. When Black Condor first popped up on the scene in DC Comics, his choice of garb was interesting. Richard Grey Jr. gained the power of flight from being exposed to a radioactive meteor, though he believed he had developed flight naturally after being raised by a flock of wild condors. Yes, really. So clearly there is a level of, how should we say this, creativity here. Like, he came back into society and then took someone else's identity while also being a costumed hero, and I think his superhero costume perfectly exemplifies how utterly off the rocker this guy actually is. Richard took to wearing a cape that draped out under each arm, being attached to his wrists with bracelets giving the semblance of wings, because he can fly. Get it? I'm sure that could probably have had some kind of effect on his flying, but the rest of the getup is kind of a mystery. Essentially, he wears a neck collar thing that looks kind of like a hood that connects to his big chunky belt with one piece of fabric in the front, and he accompanies that with some short shorts and some really ornate looking boots. Those are really cool. And that's kind of it. Luckily, later iterations of the character took their look in some much more cooler directions, but at first it was kind of weird.
Number 3. Emma Frost in Humans vs. X-Men. Emma Frost's look following in Humans vs. X-Men is something that I think is dumb, because I kind of think what happened to her character in that story was kind of dumb. Although, as someone who really enjoys Emma and enjoys her, in more of a hero role, it makes sense that I would feel that way. People who might be more fans of Emma in a villain role may have actually kind of liked what happened with her character in this story, and honestly, if you like it, that's fine. But I think either way, we can all agree, regardless of what this costume represents for the character, that it is objectively a pretty terrible costume. It honestly makes me think of what Emma cosplaying as Penance might look like. This mainly black look was one Emma donned near the end of Inhumans vs. X-Men, after it was revealed that Emma had, basically been manipulating the X-Men and mutant kind into fighting against the Inhumans. It also featured a combo Cyclops and Magneto style helmet that also kind of reminds me of Professor X's Krakoan era Cerebro helmet look. While the helmet may work on those other characters, it just doesn't really work for me with Emma. I just feel like a helmet for her is a weird choice.
Coming in at number 2, it's Catwoman. The history of Catwoman's look is a long and honestly incredibly kind of odd story. Over time, she would go through a number of looks until it eventually became a leather suit which had a more practical vibe, matched with a pair of cat eyes goggles, and it became the character's most popular costume, with later redesigns all primarily retaining the key elements of that suit. But in the very beginning, Selina Kyle was just a woman in a green dress that was also a thief. That kind of checks out for the comics at the time, and it also felt kind of unique in my opinion. Compared to all the other zany villains, she kept it rather low key, but that wouldn't last. Eventually, in 1940's Batman number 3, Selina Kyle donned an orange costume with a cape with the super great addition of a terrifying full cat face mask. This was basically like a mascot's headpiece, but a bit smaller, which I'm sure made it more practical, but for me, it's utter nightmare fuel. I don't know what it is about animal heads on human bodies, but I am not here for it. Basically, she kept the dress element that she started with, but now, it was orange, with an incredibly high popped up collar, and it was combined with a huge reddish orange cape and tiny little blue heels for added comfort. Then she topped it all off with a terrifying full headpiece, and now I have to watch videos of puppies before I go to sleep at night. Thanks a lot.
Number 1. The Real Lobo from New 52. The Real Lobo. Oh boy. New Lobo, who dis? Although there have been quite a few New 52 redesigns that I've discussed on this series of lists where we talk about dumb costumes, Lobo probably takes the cake here. The whole new look he had when he was revealed as the real Lobo in the New 52, the first version to appear was initially said by this Prime Earth Lobo to have been an imposter, was so different from the original and so serious that it completely ruined the character for a lot of people. I will say I do think this design is objectively pretty cool. Like, I think this character looks great, but it's not Lobo. This doesn't No, just not for Lobo. For Lobo, this is objectively ridiculous.
Number 10. Iron Man, but with a nose. In order to ease ourselves into the parade of awful, let's start out simple. The story of this redesign is pretty great. Apparently, Stan Lee was looking over artwork for an issue of Iron Man that had been drawn by a relatively new artist. When the artist drew Iron Man in profile, he had drawn Tony's eyes too close to the surface of the mask, which would mean that there was no room for his nose in the helmet. Stan pointed this out, saying something along the lines of, "Hey true believers, where's this cat's nose?" The editors misunderstood Stan's point and decided to start drawing Iron Man's mask with a nose on it. The in-story reason for this change was that Iron Man wanted his mask to be more expressive so that his enemies would be filled with terror, so he added a nose. Now, I don't know about you, but if a flying robot death machine being piloted by a drunken billionaire crashed through my wall, I would be terrified regardless of whether or not it had a nose. This change lasted a few issues before Stan Lee saw it and said something along the lines of, "Why does Iron Man have a nose? That looks stupid. Nuff said. So after that, Iron Man lost the weird Michael Jackson nose and went back to his regular look. Number 9. Casual Friday Superman. Another one that's not that bad is Superman's original New 52 look. After the DC universe was rebooted, Action Comics showed us some adventures from the early days of this version of the character. As a Superman who is still figuring out what kind of hero he is, this look makes a lot of sense. Instead of the tights and trunks, he wears blue jeans and a t-shirt with the Superman logo. I don't hate this look, but I do think the short red cape looks a bit out of place with such a casual look for the Man of Steel. It's a bit underwhelming for a character like Superman, but that is intentional as it helps build anticipation for the moment when he does eventually get his full New 52 costume, which is actually one of the character's better looks. Towards the end of the New 52 era, Superman returned to his more casual look after he had been weakened by using his new solar flare power, giving the whole thing a nice sense of symmetry. Overall, I like this look for the story purpose it serves, but from a pure aesthetic point of view, it's probably one of Superman's worst. Number 8. Booster Gold's armored suit. A lot of the entries on this list are going to be from that period in the 90s when almost every character who was known for wearing spandex was suddenly given bulky metal armor. So let's start things out with what they did to Booster Gold. Booster Gold's original look features various bits of tech that he stole from a museum that he worked at in the 25th century. This includes a force field belt that is able to repel contact from all known forces short of a nuclear blast. This is why he's able to get away with wearing a light spandex costume, or at least he was. When his usual supersuit was destroyed in the 90s, Booster was forced to wear this rather bulky and heavily armored version of his suit. As someone who really likes Booster's usual look, this is a rough one to look at. And from a technical standpoint, why would someone wear armor yet leave the top of their head completely exposed? Isn't that one of the most vulnerable parts of the human body? Number 7. The Wasp's crossing redesign. Janet Van Dyne has had a few looks over the years, from her classic red and black outfit to her more modern black and yellow suit, but this founding Avenger has one look that is not remembered very fondly, and that is the look she was given in The Crossing. In this story, Tony Stark was revealed to be evil and working for Kang the Conqueror. He came into conflict with the Avengers and in the ensuing battle hit Wasp with a repulsor ray. Hank Pym tried to save her by exposing her to the chemicals that had given her powers, but this resulted in her forming a cocoon. When she came out of the cocoon, she had grown wings and antennas, and her head and hair had taken on a truly bizarre shape. Not to mention the scary long fingers she had developed. This new look came with stronger powers, but thankfully she was reverted back to her human form 10 months later in the Heroes Reborn continuity shakeup. Number 6. Black Canary's 80s look. Black Canary is a difficult character to redesign. On the one hand, her original costume is iconic. On the other hand, it is a somewhat dated and sexualized look with all the leather, corsets, and fishnets. Over the years, the look has gone through a lot of variation, trying to keep the general essence of the character intact while still making the outfit practical for a superhero. Out of the character's many looks, however, most would probably agree that this 80s redesign is the furthest from the mark. The boots are a lot to take in, but the billowy top with the long puffed sleeves is pretty rough. The worst part of this look, however, is the bird emblem that's wings extend beyond her shoulders. This look is not remembered fondly, and when the character went back to her more classic look, they made a point of showing her burning this costume on the cover of Action Comics number 609. Number 5. Armored Captain America. In the 90s, we were treated to an arc in the comics where, after so many years of being a hero, the super soldier serum in Captain America's body was beginning to wear off and was causing him to lose control of his body. This culminated in him having a massive heart attack and becoming paralyzed and unable to move his body at all. Tony Stark came to his friend's aid and constructed this metal exosuit which not only allowed him to move, but also let him fly and shoot repulsor beams and anti-missile armaments. This armor allowed him to keep fighting but did not heal Cap's heart, which resulted in him needing to get a blood and bone transplant from Red Skull. Although this is a very purpose-built suit, it is a bit too bulky for the already large Captain America, and is just another example of the 90s trend of everyone getting elaborate armor suits. What pushes it over the edge is an admittedly minor detail: the one eye hole. I don't know why, but it really bugs me, and if there was something in between the two eyes like his usual mask, I probably wouldn't have ranked it so high. I know, it's dumb, but it just bugs me so much for some reason that I can't really explain. It's a good thing articulating my opinions online isn't my job, or I'd be in real trouble. Number 4. Biker Wonder Woman. When Wonder Woman's mother learned of a prophecy that told her Wonder Woman would soon die, she tried to trick fate by making someone else Wonder Woman. She held a new contest for the title, made sure that Diana lost and that another Amazon named Artemis won. She hoped that this would result in Artemis being the one to die and Diana being able to live on. Although she was no longer Wonder Woman, Woman, Diana still operated as a hero, creating a new costume for herself. She was given leather shorts and a leather bra with only the bracelets and the W on the belt line letting you know who she was. Although to be fair, they did sometimes let her wear a jacket. This is a trend that honestly really bugs me with female redesigns, where they are given new costumes that are really over-sexualized to a point that it isn't justified by the story. Yes, it makes sense that she would get a new costume after losing the Wonder Woman mantle, but the fact that it looks like that makes whatever story reasons they give meaningless, as in the end it was just about drawing her in a skimpy costume. Same goes for Sue Storm's 90s boob window costume that I talked about in part 1, by the way. In order to get my point across, let me give you an example. Remember when Spider-Man got the black suit and it started affecting his behavior? That was a great redesign, and the story that told it justified the change. Now imagine the same arc, but instead of the black suit, Peter is wearing a leather thong. It would make the story worse and would make me think that it was never about telling a good story. It was about drawing Spider-Man in a thong. Rant over, moving on. Number 3, Jim Gordon's robot batsuit. When Bruce Wayne lost his memories of his cape and cowl days, longtime ally Jim Gordon was forced to take up the mantle for a bit. As he was unable to physically do all the things that Batman could, he was given a powerful robot mech suit in order to help him fight crime. It was several feet tall and featured a cloaking device, rocket boots, and a tear gas cannon, as well as quite a few other tricks. This is actually a pretty fun arc in the comics, but Jim actually sums up the problems with the suit pretty well when he first sees it, saying, "I look at that thing, but I just don't see Batman. It's like a bunny. Like a robot bat bunny." And he's right. The ears make it look like a rabbit, and it kind of throws the whole look off. However, the sleek black and yellow bat suit that Jim wears inside the suit is cool as hell. Number 2, Catwoman's armored suit. The last of the armored suits on this list is the suit that Catwoman wore for one issue in Catwoman Volume 2, Issue 50. When the villainous Cybercat decided to make it her mission in life to kill Selina Kyle, Catwoman was outmatched by the powerful Mech Cat. She went to her tech specialist, Clutterbuck, and asked him to design a new suit for her that would let her go toe-to-toe with her foe. The resulting armor suit had a retractable cable whip, giant sharp claws, night vision, and wrist-mounted missiles. As Catwoman puts it, it's not exactly her. As a character known for being sleek and prowling about, this suit is just not suited for the character. Catwoman hated the suit, only using it to defeat Cybercat and then immediately having Clutterbuck destroy it in a compactor. Number 1, Flashpoint Zatanna. When Barry Allen went back in time to try and save his mother's life and accidentally created the Flashpoint timeline, we were treated to a lot of great alternate versions of characters. Their version of Zatanna is not one of them. Look, I already made my feelings about overly sexualized redesigns clear in the Wonder Woman entry, so I'm not gonna beat a dead horse despite the fact that this outfit clearly falls into that category. Instead, I'm gonna talk about when redesigns miss the point of a character. Zatanna is a magic wielder and a stage magician. Therefore, all her good designs lean into this, so that even if you know nothing about the character, you can take one look at her and guess her deal. Oh, that lady dressed as a magician probably does magic. Now, looking at the Flashpoint version of the character, her look tells you nothing about her character other than she wears a lot of leather. The fact that it does nothing to indicate what the character is about is why I think it's one of the worst superhero redesigns. Number 10, Nightfall Batman. When Batman had his back broken by Bane in the infamous Nightfall story arc, he was replaced by the vigilante Azrael, who took it upon himself to redesign the Batsuit. Now, Batman's look has remained relatively consistent over the years, usually consisting of a gray bodysuit with a blue or black cape and mask. The only real variance over the years has been the black undies, the bat emblem, and the length of his ears. So any changes Azrael was going to make were going to really stand out. The redesign featured intense shoulder pads, a more armored look, as well as claws and an overabundance of pouches. My personal favorite part of this mess is the strange fins coming out of his legs. The entire point of the Nightfall arc was to explore a classic hero like Batman's place in a 90s setting, where readers were gravitating more towards extreme anti-heroes like the Punisher. So the over-the-top nature of this costume is very much intentional, which is why it's ranked at the bottom of this list. Number 9, Daredevil's armored suit. Daredevil is a character who has managed to have a lot of good redesigns throughout the years. His original yellow and red suit was fine, but was improved upon when he was given his iconic red suit. Even his prototype suit featured in Frank Miller's Man Without Fear run is somehow iconic despite its simplicity. But when looking at his various looks from over the years, the worst in my opinion is his armored suit. It's not horrible by any stretch, but between the red red on black chest pieces and the various metal plates that make his shoulders look like the vents of an air conditioner, the whole thing just feels a bit busy. This redesign was done in order to make it more convincing that Daredevil could take on stronger supervillains, but having read stories where he's taken on villains in both this outfit and the red suit, it doesn't really make much of a difference, so may as well stick with the classic suit. Number 8. 90s Thor. Okay, so the 90s were a rough time to be a superhero apparently. The industry was pushing the stories in really weird directions, and in an effort to appeal to a modern audience in time for the approaching new millennium, it seemed like every classic hero was getting a weird new redesign. Of the 90s redesigns, very few of them stuck around, and that's a good thing, especially for Thor. Despite his original look being pretty clean and adaptable to a modern style, this somehow managed to take everything that worked about the original design and make it awful. In a move that is usually only reserved for female superheroes, the decision was made for Thor's midriff to be exposed, and for him to be given a giant leather codpiece. At least I think it's leather. It's the same color as his boots and shoulder pads, so that's probably right. I can understand how 90s Marvel would think that getting rid of the wing helmet would be the right call, but the weird faceless mask with the long flowing locks is a bit much. It's a bad look, but it does kinda draw attention to how ridiculous many female superhero designs are by applying the same aesthetic to a male figure. Number 7. Raven's New 52 look. Raven's original look is brilliant in its simplicity. One piece with a cool belt and a long flowing cloak with a large hood that covers her eyes. It's great. They eventually changed it to give her pants. Totally understandable. Not complaining. I like wearing pants too. But when the character was redesigned for the New 52, the look was altered for a new generation of fans, which is code for made worse. This overdesign decided to really lean into the bird theme, with her cloak being given a more feathered look. Kind of an odd choice, but I can get on board with a more detailed cape. What I can't wrap my head around is the weird feather mask covering her face. Not only is it ugly and distracting, but it also has no eye holes. Now, obviously she can see, but the lack of any eyes makes it really hard for the character to emote. The eyes are the window to the soul. Think of how expressive a character like Spider-Man is with his eyes, even if they are technically covered. This design gives us nothing to latch onto and makes Raven look like some boring woman with a grocery bag on her head. Number 6. Lobo's New 52 makeover. Another odd choice made by the folks at DC during the New 52 reboot is what they did to poor Lobo. Lobo is a character that is beloved for his excess. He was designed to be a parody of the 90s grimdark trend in comics, but readers didn't catch the joke and he was beloved by fans and received his own book. In a move that no one saw coming, the New 52 introduced a leaner, more refined version of the character, which seemed to fly in the face of his previous iteration. To add insult to injury, it was revealed that this was the real Lobo, and that the Lobo everyone actually enjoyed was an imposter. Kinda like that Simpsons episode, Principal and the Pauper. If DC was going to go to the trouble of introducing a new version of the character who looks nothing like Lobo and doesn't act like Lobo, why not just make a new character? Was this decision made with the intent of making the least amount of people possible happy? Number 5. Captain America's nomad look. In the fallout of the Watergate scandal, Captain America became disillusioned with the United States and decided that he could no longer be the Star-Spangled Man. He decided to become a man of no country and instead help save the world as Nomad. He replaced his Captain America costume with a costume that somehow manages to be equal parts way too much and not enough. He wears a simple black spandex bodysuit with yellow gloves, belt, and boots, and a black and yellow cape. Pretty basic, pretty boring. The only thing memorable about this outfit is the extremely deep cut V that goes all the way down to his navel. Granted, compared to his usual outfit, nothing was going to look as interesting, but this feels like a generic dollar store hero, not something befitting of one of the founding Avengers. I guess it makes sense as an outfit when you consider that he was wearing it as a form of protest. Number 4. Wonder Woman's karate makeover. In the late 1960s, the men at DC Comics decided that it was time to give their most iconic female superhero a feminist redesign. Unfortunately, rather than asking any women what they thought, they decided the best way to accomplish this was to take Wonder Woman's powers away. The thought process was that Wonder Woman was beholden to a male god, Zeus, so to make her more independent, she should learn karate to fight her enemies. They would be showing that she was a strong woman who could use hard work and determination to be a hero rather than relying on powers given to her by a man. What they failed to realize is that Wonder Woman was already a feminist icon, and female readers liked having a powerful character they could look up to. You'll also notice they didn't feel the need to take away Superman's powers powers in order to prove that he was a capable hero. Instead of her classic red and gold armor with her signature tiara and lasso of truth, she was given a generic white outfit. There's really nothing to say about it other than that. It's boring and a step backwards for her both fashion-wise and as a character. Thankfully, this caught the attention of a real-life feminist icon, Gloria Steinem, who had grown up on the comics. She decried the removal of a strong female role model and began a successful campaign to return Wonder Woman to her full power. When later asked about the changes he made to the character, Denny O'Neil was quoted as saying, "Oh boy, did I screw that up. I thought I was on the side of feminism. Sorry." Number 3, Electric Superman. Being the first superhero who has looked mostly the same since his creation in 1938, Superman is a difficult character to redesign. Whatever look you give him, it needs to be distinctly Superman. Some of his most popular redesigns include the black suit, the 2011 New 52 reboot, which got rid of his red trunks and gave him a high collar, and my personal favorite, the Rebirth outfit, which is just the classic suit with a red and gold belt, allowing the character to keep his classic color scheme while still modernizing the look of it. Despite this, it is never long before Superman ends up in his classic suit, red underwear included. Perhaps his most infamous redesign came in 1998, when the creatives at DC Comics decided to challenge the Man of Steel by giving him new powers. The logic being that having completely new abilities would be like forcing the character to learn to walk again. Superman was given electric energy-based powers, and as a result was given a new look consisting of a blue and white bodysuit with an electrical theme and blue skin. To add to the weirdness, he was split into two beings, with a second Superman having essentially the same suit with a red color palette, playing off the classic Elseworlds story Superman Red and Superman Blue from Superman Volume 1, number 162. It's not a horrible outfit, but it's just too drastic a departure for Superman, with nothing but the S-shield to ground the character in his long history. Number 2, Sue Storm's 90s outfit. Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, have had a lot of redesigns over the years, but tend to stick relatively close to their original blue bodysuits. Compared to a lot of superheroines, Sue has usually been able to walk the line with the way she is drawn by artists, so that she is obviously attractive but not usually overly sexualized. Unfortunately, her 90s look doesn't really manage to thread this needle and ends up being more revealing than any story reasons could ever really justify. While most female costumes in comic books are redesigned to be more practical over time, this redesign took away Sue's pants, giving her white stockings and blue garters. Her midriff was completely exposed, and perhaps most notably, the 4 emblem on her chest is cut out to create a number-shaped boob window. This outfit feels like something out of an adult film parody of the Fantastic Four, and is so over-sexualized that it ends up just looking ridiculous, not to mention the bizarre tan lines Sue would end up with. Number 1, Hawkeye's skirt. Usually when a superhero gets a massive redesign, it is to either modernize their look or give them a more dignified look. A great example of this is Robin. For years he had the pantsless pixie boot look, but when Tim Drake took over the mantle, he was given an updated costume that kept the basic look and color scheme, but gave him a more dignified look. Pants. It gave him pants. I like to think of Hawkeye as the anti-Robin, as for a while his costumes got lamer and lamer every few years. His original look was fine, a blue and purple tunic with a purple mask and a bit of a Batman thing going on. To tie the look together, he had a big H on his head, because, you know, Hawkeye starts with an H. This look changed drastically when he took on the superhero identity of Goliath. He basically started wearing a pro wrestling outfit with a weightlifting belt and a weird shoulder strap with a strip of fabric whose only purpose seemed to be to cover his nipples. This is a bad redesign, but his next outfit is even worse, consisting of nothing but an open vest, a headband, and a very short skirt. After a while, they gave up on giving Hawkeye a cool costume, and now he basically just wears a t-shirt with a purple arrow on the chest. Maybe that's for the best.
Number 10, Typeface. What a strange one. Typeface was a fairly short-lived villain from Spider-Man comics. He made his first appearance in Peter Parker Spider-Man issue number 23. Initially, Typeface was villain Gordon Thomas. After suffering much misfortune in his life and being laid off from the only job that gave him solace, creating signs, he decided to become a villain, aiming to get retribution. He took a grease pencil and wrote a bunch of letters on his face, that big R on his forehead for retribution, and he also donned a bunch of letters, wearing them on his clothes and sometimes kind of like a necklace of sorts. This was his look. Now, he didn't really have any powers, just a passion for fonts and letters, although he was military trained, so at least he had that. His time as a criminal was quite short, as he was pretty quickly inspired by Spider-Man actually, and a memory of his brother, to seek redemption instead of retribution. But even his time as a hero also was not really that long, probably in part due to how ridiculous his outfit and his gimmick was, as typeface. He literally fought people by throwing letters at one point, so that's kind of where we're at. Number 9, Kite Man. I love Kite Man, but no matter what suit I see him in, pretty much all of them are ridiculous because, well, I mean, he's so ridiculous. Kite Man has to be one of the highlights of the Harley Quinn animated series. Although I'm a bit behind right now, to be honest, he has been one of the greatest characters that stand out to me from that show, and honestly, I love how much dimension they give Kite Man. Like, this show made me such a Kite Man fan, and even though, yeah, I think his suit is dumb, that doesn't mean that I don't love Kite Man. When it comes to his suit, of course, it is pretty dumb because, I mean, well, he wears a kite on his back. That's pretty ridiculous, which he uses or attempts to use to commit crimes. But that doesn't mean I love him any less. In fact, I probably love him even more because of how dumb his look and his gimmick are. Hell yeah! Number 8, Original Kang the Conqueror. Even though I do love Kang, and also I personally do love his look, even I cannot deny that he looks absolutely ridiculous. From the helmet to the tunic down to the metallic adornments on his outfit here. This look is definitely one that seems to have emerged from a time storm, but I wouldn't necessarily guess from the future myself. Although something that you do have to admire and admit about it is that it is iconic, it's striking, and it stands out. The original Kang look was created by Jack Kirby, who truly is a legendary artist, and despite the fact that, you know, this look now feels dated, the fact remains that this costume has pretty much remained the same throughout the character's long history, which I think is a testament to, you know, how striking and iconic it is. When it comes to his standard look, you know, this is pretty much it. So yes, it might seem ridiculous, but it certainly is memorable, and despite being silly, is still very clearly loved by a lot of us. Even in the MCU, they pretty much left this look as is. They just kind of like texturized it, I think, a little bit, and other than that, yeah, I mean, it looks great in the MCU, even though objectively ridiculous. Number 7, New 52 Riddler. I love the Riddler as a villain, but not all of his looks have been smash hits. Included in the lot that are not so great is his redesign from the New 52. We first see him, I believe, as an inmate in Arkham Asylum there. He wears a bandana with 2 holes cut out as, you know, places for his eyes to go, the usual Arkham inmate suit, and of course sports that famous, but honestly very terrible, green question mark mohawk, but trimmed all the way down. It's definitely a look, but it's not a look that I'm really a fan of for Riddler, I will tell you that. I like New 52 Riddler the best when he's in a suit decorated with question marks. Even the Jim Carrey version of this character in question mark bespeckled spandex is way preferred to me over this look. Fortunately, as New 52 would go on, this design would evolve and change. Thank goodness. New 52 was an interesting time for a lot of people in redesigns. Number 6, Marvel Now High Evolutionary. Everyone right now wants to talk about how great the High Evolutionary is, and I get it. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he was a horrific villain, and Chukwudi Iwuji nailed the role completely. He really made for a good and true classic villain, but let's take a look at the High Evolutionary in the comics. What is he like? Well, he's about as ridiculous looking as the harebrained science schemes he ends up involved in. I can tell you that much. Well, pretty much every look he's had looks completely weird to me. I think one of the most strange, for me personally, is the one he wore during the 2012 Marvel Now event. Here he donned his normal metal suit, but with more added studs. Number 5, Calendar Man's Calendar Cape. I mean, you have to give him some points for super committing, but the Calendar Man cape is pretty objectively ridiculous, I would say. This costume at least also came with somewhat of an improved gimmick with more deadly weapons at his disposal as well. I believe the first appearance of the Calendar Cape was in issue 312 of Batman. Instead of him being a magician who is secretly a criminal, fond of riddles and various antics tied to days of the week, holidays, and even seasons, this time around Calendar Man was more fixated on the days of the week and the gods that they were named after, theming many of his crimes around them. Although, to be honest, if I were going to cosplay as Calendar Man, I would definitely wear a calendar cape. Number 4, Shocker. I mean, Shocker is just all around pretty ridiculous in the comics, I think. We can all agree on that, and his costume is no exception. Shocker basically looks like he took a sofa, gutted it, and turned it into his costume, which perhaps makes sense when you consider his abilities. He typically attempts to shock Spider-Man, so perhaps being insulated helps him to protect himself against his own shock-inducing weapons? I don't know. Still, you can't deny that even if there is some kind of practical use for this look, that he doesn't look absolutely ridiculous in it, because he definitely does. And honestly, I'm not really even sure if there's a practical use for this suit. I'm just trying to like help make it make sense. I want it to make sense, but I don't know if there is a reason for why he wears it. Number 3, Batman the Animated Series Condiment King. Condiment King is one of my all-time favorite villains because he simply is so ridiculous. What can I say? I'm a sucker for ridiculous dumb characters, especially villains. But him also being a villain armed to the teeth with condiments also means he's gonna look pretty ridiculous as he roams the town, squirting people with ketchup and mustard. That being said, his look in the animated series still takes the cake for one of the dumbest of all of his looks. Of course, this was done on purpose. You can tell pretty much everyone that has designed a Condiment King look is, you know, in on the joke. What I really love about this ridiculous look is the fact that he's literally wearing white underwear over his suit, which is just hilarious. Such a play on like ridiculous costumes in general. Costumes that we think look great, but are still kind of ridiculous. Also white underwear when you're firing like condiments. Dangerous. Number 2, First MODOK. The very first appearance of MODOK was in Tales of Suspense issue number 94. This design is another created by Jack Kirby, which throughout the years has mainly remained unchanged. Sure, there have been different MODOKs and some alternate looks offered to us, but the main MODOK look has pretty much remained about the same. A suit that contains a giant head with little limbs fully sheathed in purple metal, and all seemingly floating and contained by a hover chair which MODOK uses to get around. The implication here is that his little legs can no longer support the weight of his massive head and brain. The look is ridiculous, sure, but it really does help MODOK to stand out. And it's also this dumb look that has kind of helped to inform his character over the years, which also I love. While he often yearns to be as terrifying as the words that his name stands for implies, he also is just super ridiculous. Number 1, Codpiece's Codpiece. Codpiece, of course, is none other than a Doom Patrol villain because, well, I mean, look at this guy. His whole thing is weapons. A very specific weapon located in a very specific place. It's a big red gun that he wears on a harness, acting as a weaponized, well, codpiece. Why this costume? Why this gimmick? That's a good question. Because when he was in high school, he once asked a girl out and she turned him down for being quote unquote too small. Now, she didn't mean what he thought she did, she meant simply that he was too short. Misinterpreting this and seeking to prove himself, he became the criminal known as Codpiece. In the comics, I believe he was a one and done villain. I feel like I'd be nervous wearing a costume like this because if someone shot back at your weapon, the location of it might result in you being damaged in some pretty sensitive parts. So definitely makes sense that he was a one and done villain though. I mean, I feel like, what else are you gonna do with this guy?